sometimes you can have mud on you, and then you'll just throw on a suit and cover it. And then people won't know what you've been through. They'll just see the exterior of the suit that you had on. It's not always just this easy, hey, let me just step into this. Sometimes it is a journey. Too often we try to hide our pain, or mask the hard times that we're dealing with because we don't want to be judged. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting another person to die. It keeps you in this prison, this unending cycle of turmoil and pain and hurt. Through my journey, I learned, that forgiveness is more for you than it is for the other person. Like I said, it's freedom.
Some stories come from the spotlight. Others come from the mud, the hard places that build character. Today, we're walking through both with someone who's learned to turn pain into purpose. Michael, how's it going, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
Man, likewise, man. Thank you for making time. We know life is busy. With Elite Insights, I'm always looking to find people that I'm curious about and people that bring me hope and joy and just intrigue, and try to share that with people, and hopefully they can get something out of it. We talked a little bit off camera that, the folks that we're talking to is someone that was in my shoes 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and hopefully we can find someone that possibly could be in yours as well, and we can provide that spark. That's like, they're at a point where they're wanting change or they're yearning for something. They might not know what that is. And sometimes just hearing from other humans, this is the human story, right? Yeah. We all go through it. And hopefully they can get something from that. But I always like to start off with what got you to this couch? What was some of your first or our first times of crossing paths that you can remember?
Yeah. So we crossed paths a couple of times actually. I attended the MLK breakfast.
Yes.
And also the Douglas Declaration on just this past 4th of July. The time that I spent doing the Douglas Declaration and even going to the MLK breakfast, it just seemed like what you guys were doing and how you guys were set up was so professional, and I really appreciated that. So our paths crossed that way. And then just recently, man, I came over with Michelle actually and saw and watched her do her episode of the podcast, and, we chopped it up a little bit. And so I'm here now.
Yeah, and here we are.
Yeah.
And I like to also give some people some context. The MLK breakfast, prayer breakfast is something special. And again, shout out to Michelle for planting those seeds. We went into it on her episode where she was speaking our names in rooms that we weren't in, and the importance of being prepared or being vouchable, I think was the word. And it's just a matter of just being prepared for the moment, right? It's like, we always talk about you always hear people talking about, not getting opportunities. And some of it's like, man, would you even be ready for the opportunity if it were to come? So it's just that a matter of working on yourselves, working on your crafts, and be ready, because you don't know when you're going to get tapped. Coming forward to that 4th of July, you were Frederick Douglass. Like, how dope was that, right? I remember us watching that, like literally getting chills. I'm literally getting chills now thinking about it in the moment, where it was like, man, those are some powerful words, because it just rings so true today, which is unfortunate, but also very interesting how life can imitate art, and then art imitate life, and then life imitate art all over again. But it's the importance of, being able to hear those words again, and having people that can step up to that moment, right? And literally step up to that pew or that platform and be able to speak those words in a way that resonates with the folks that were hearing it. So, kudos to you to be able to step into that role and be in that moment. So that was dope just to be. I mean, we were recording, we was working, but we're also listening. We're also part of the audience, and it was dope to kind of to see how it was hitting.
Yeah.
And then I just want to rewind a little bit in terms of like your story, your journey, what kind of brought you to come where you're at. It's kind of like, how has your walk in faith, or your just kind of walk in life, how has that kind of gotten to where you are today? If you can kind of share some of your background.
Yeah, man. Honestly, life just be lifing, for real. I'm from California. I was born on March Air Force Base in Riverside, and kind of lived all over the IE. So shout out to the IE. From there, I got married, started having kids, and I always had this thing in my mind, in my heart, that I wanted to buy a house. Like, it was the American dream, so I would work hard, and my my ex-wife and I at the time, we lived well below our means so we can raise our own kids. That was always something that was really important to me, was I wanted to raise my own kids. And so I worked, she stayed home, but we lived below our means for so many years. And then finally we were able to buy a house. And, a year later, I moved to Las Vegas and took a better job, and so I kind of just always found myself jumping from place to place, never felt like I've had community or home or any of that. And, just kind of trying to walk through just the uncertainty of that and bring myself to where I am today. But really what it's just been a journey. It's been a journey of ups and downs and highs and lows and finding out who I am, learning about some of the things that aren't so savory about myself, and really coming to terms with that and meeting that head on and trying to do better, trying to change and trying to, show up different and, just be the type of man that I want my son to be, and that's kind of the way that I view it.
No, I love that, and I got a small son, about to be 5-year-old, and that's something that passes through me a lot. When you kind of catch yourself in a moment of a long day, they're not doing something that you want. It's like, wait, why am I even getting mad? Like, this is a 5-year-old. let me check myself real quick, because it's like, do I want you to be this type of person, and I'm not even doing it myself, right? And it's interesting. So I feel like I've learned a lot personally in these last 5 years, trying to better myself to be the person that I would love for my son to, be more than, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't change when they get older.
Yeah, at all.
The circumstance is different, but it doesn't change when they get older.
Yeah, respect to that for sure. What can you tell us about A Walk Through the Mud and kind of what inspired that movement?
So the whole point of starting that podcast is just because my life has been that. I've had to walk through some really hard things in life to get to where I am today. And like I was saying, my journey through just being unstable in my childhood, I like to say that I have a colorful childhood, because I don't want to out my parents or any of that stuff. They did the best they could with what they had. And so I don't look at them, but that's been a part of the journey. A part of that journey is learning how to forgive them, learning how to forgive some of the things that have happened in my life, and kind of walking through the mud. Sometimes, I had Hill Harper on my podcast, and one of the things that he said that resonated with me a lot was sometimes you can have mud on you, and then you'll just throw on a suit and cover it, and then people won't know that what you've been through. They'll just see the exterior of the suit that you had on. And it resonated with me because oftentimes people don't know the things that you go through. They just see the outward appearance. They see the smile. They see being jovial, and they see, oh yeah, I've got kids and they're doing this and they're doing that and there's a show. But you don't really always understand what it took for you to even get to that point where you can share your smile with somebody, or you can share your story, or even be sitting here on the couch. Like it's not always just this easy, hey, let me just step into this. Sometimes it is a journey. And so for me, I wanted to start A Walk Through the Mud to basically just share the stories. It's how real life meets faith and forgiveness. And so it's been the journey through that. And that's why I wanted to call it A Walk Through the Mud.
I love that. And forgiveness is like a big thing. And you see that in many cultures, many faiths. I think it's something that is universal with the human experience.
Yeah.
And I feel like it has power in different ways, where a lot of times where, folks are like, forgive but don't forget. And there's something to that for sure. But I think forgiveness, I think, is one of the absolute things that you can do for yourself more so than someone else. Because it's like when you're not forgiving, you're allowing a power or something to be a part of, you're carrying some of that.
Yeah.
And it's like at times for me where it wasn't a matter of like getting over it, but it was just a matter of like, man, I don't even want to carry that anymore. Like
forgiveness is freedom. Man.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
Freedom.
So I love that, that is a part of that storytelling and a part of what you have going on, and how people sometimes forget the importance of forgiveness. And like, man, why are things still coming up today? Like, well, did you ever deal with that thing? And it's a lot of it is done through therapy, and I'm not a therapist or nothing like that, but a lot of it is having those conversations and talking through. But I feel like a lot of it kind of will be found through forgiveness, and can allow you to go so much further and like, really materialize your joy and kind of appreciate things in their fullness. Because I feel like when you don't forgive and you have hate or anguish or whatever those other things are, it kind of dims your light or whatever light is supposed to be on you,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, man, I want people to be full, right?
Yeah.
Live full lives, love fully, live fully.
You know, the best analogy of forgiveness that is there's a woman I was talking to one day, and she said, you know, unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting another person to die, you know? Like, it keeps you in this prison, this unending cycle of turmoil and pain and hurt. And that's really what it was for me. You know, I like to tell this story. I took the kids. So one of the things on my bucket list was to take the kids on a vacation, like a real vacation, you know? And so we went down to Florida. And we went to Disney World, wanted to take the kids out there, Disney World, and we, you know, get there, and Disney World was dope. And then we went to Miami, hung out down there, shout out to Miami. And then we drove down to the Florida Keys, got an Airbnb, and we're staying there. And in this Airbnb, it's like this community that had a pool and, you know, all this stuff. And so I always lived in turmoil. I was always ready to fight at the drop of a hat. And maybe it wasn't always like a physical fight, but an argument, any sort of confrontation is where I lived, you know? And so we kind of get down to this place and we walk into this pool, and it's me, my wife at the time, and my daughter. I don't know what my son was doing, but my daughter was with me. So we walk in there, and there's a bunch of white people surrounding inside of this pool. And so as soon as we walk in, all eyes are on us. And I immediately felt like this, you know, like I threw up this wall, like I don't want to, you know, engage with anybody. So we're going through here, and I'm looking, and everybody's mad, and I'm mad, and everybody's just like, you know, looking. But there was one woman in particular that kept staring at us, you know, and she kept looking at me. And so I'm like, what is wrong with this lady? You know? And so here I am ready to be confrontational. So then my wife at the time jumps in the water, and she swims over there, and she starts having a conversation with this woman. Well, turns out this woman was from Seattle, and I was wearing like a Mariners shirt or something, or a hat or something like that. But the moral of that story is just, I always walked around with this chip on my shoulder. I always walked around ready to be in any kind of confrontation. And it was because I didn't forgive. I never learned how to forgive. I didn't even know what it was like or what it was supposed to be. You know, my idea of forgiveness was so way far off in the left field. I had no idea. I thought that you were giving somebody something if you forgave them, you know, and it just wasn't that at all. And so through my journey, I learned, you know, that forgiveness is more for you than it is for the other person. Like I said, it's freedom, you know, and so that's, you know, it's just been a journey for me.
I love that, and how that can come together. And it's like you find power in that, right? Where it's like, oh, I've identified something. Where it's like, oh, this is a me thing, right? Yeah. I'm not giving something away. I'm actually gaining something. Yeah. If you look at the net positive of that whole interaction, or just approaching the world through that lens. And you literally mentioned Journey a couple of times, so great segue into the book. What can you tell us about Journey?
So the book is my raw, authentic, you know, story through forgiving people in my life. I sat with a friend of mine, and we were talking about, you know, he was just like, man, if you can just name all the people, you know, just name them and say, I forgive. And bro, like literally like 30 minutes later, I'm still naming people, you know, talking about I forgive. And so as I was doing that, I'm like, man, I think there are so many people out there that struggle with these same things. I think that I can probably help somebody with my story, you know? And so I wanted to make it real. I wanted to make it an authentic thing, because I think sometimes I read books and, you know, sometimes it's redundant, and that's no knock on anybody else. It's just the way that I process information. I just want to get straight to the point. And so when I wrote the book, that was my thought, is get straight to the point, get straight to the meat and potatoes of what I'm trying to talk about, and really just show people that there is authenticity even in those hard times. Like I can stand up and be authentic. I think too often we try to hide our pain, you know, or mask the hard times that we're dealing with, because we don't want to be judged. You don't want to be judged. You don't want to be rejected. You don't want to feel less than. And for me, that was a part of the journey. A part of the journey was really to walk through even those moments that didn't feel the greatest, even in the times where I didn't feel like myself, and I was fighting to, you know, just to even get up out of bed during the day, and putting those down, putting pen to paper and showing people like, hey, you can get through that. That's a moment in time, like you're not stuck in that for the rest of your life, and so writing that book journey was a huge deal for me, and I dedicated it to my grandmother. She has since passed away, but Dorothy Ling was her name. And so, man, my bad. I didn't, but she was the greatest woman that I've ever met in my life, and I didn't get to know my family coming up. I didn't meet my dad until I was 20 years old. And I only got to know my grandmother for about 14 years of my life. And so, one time I was up in Maryland visiting my dad, and she got sick and had to go to the hospital. And so, and I didn't know her very well. I was still overwhelmed by this idea of having all this family and all these uncles that I never met before, and these cousins. And, because between my grandfather, one of his brothers, they had like 90 something kids, so I got a lot of family. So my grandmother's in this hospital and everybody's going in and out and, checking on her and then going back and talking. And I'm overwhelmed by the idea, just the mass of family that I have. And so I go and I stand on the doorway of her hospital bed, and, she just calls me over and she's like, "What's wrong?" And, I'm like, "Grandma, I'm fine. Nothing. I'm good. I'm a man." And, and she was just like, "No, I know you. Tell me what's wrong." And I just looked in her eyes. I didn't have words for her. And she said, "You have to let it go." I didn't tell her what I was hanging on to. I didn't even tell her I was hanging on to anything. She was like, "You have to let it go." And she just grabbed my face and told me this story about how she had dealt with unforgiveness also, and about how she had to overcome that, but she had to let it go as well. And it wasn't just a process of like, "Oh, hey, it's just done." She said, "It's been a lifelong journey for me to let it go and then continue to keep it away after that." And so when she told me that, it broke my heart, but it freed me. It opened this idea of, hey, I can have a life beyond all this hurt and pain that I'm feeling, and I can do something about it, like I can really be free from that. And so from there, is where my journey started. And I had a plethora of people that I had to learn to forgive and walk through. But, I always say, without my grandmother, I don't know where I would be, so just allowing people to come and speak into your life, even when it's hard, is a blessing, so. Yeah.
Oh, that's dope. So it sounds like you found some healing through the storytelling process.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because it seems like storytelling, through this book and work that you've done through acting and theater and different types of performance arts. How has that been kind of transformational for you? Like in that way of how has storytelling helped you find healing?
Planning a milestone birthday, a high-impact gala, or an intimate wedding? At Small Patrol, we don't believe in one-size-fits-all. We provide a range of tailored creative solutions designed to fit the unique energy of your celebration. Ready to book? Click the link in our bio to view our full-service menu and secure your date.
So it sounds like you found some healing through the storytelling process.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because it seems like storytelling, through this book and work that you've done through acting and theater and different types of performance arts. How has that been kind of transformational for you? Like in that way of how has storytelling helped you find healing?
There's freedom in forgiving, and then there's power in freedom, and grabbing a hold of that power that I didn't know that I had, and allowing myself to open up to new ideas and new spaces is a big deal. And connecting with being able to tell my own story, and just again, the freedom that comes with sharing your story and not holding back. I feel like if I can tell somebody about who I am and have a real authentic journey about what that looks like, who I am and who I've become, I don't have to hide any part of me after that. You know, like the bad thing to me about lying is that you always have to keep it up. You know, like if you're trying to put on a front, you have to always maintain that same front. And I'm just not that way, you know, and this is Michael, this is who I am. I'm going to be this. And if I presented myself this way, if you like it, great, let's be cool. If you don't, then, you know, it is what it is. But so being able to be authentically myself has helped me also be able to tell different stories of other people, you know? And so Acts on Stage is an amazing theater in White Center, and they have given me the opportunity to really get on stage and tell stories that I connect to, that I love, and, you know, and really being a part of a family that grows in that, you know? And so I think storytelling is one of the great arts that it just spans across time. I think, you know, there's a saying that, you know, even if AI takes over the whole world, you know, the last thing that'll go is storytelling, you know, is acting. Because how can you, as a machine, portray being an authentic human being as a machine that's authentically portraying another human being? You know, like you can't do that. You know, you got to start, there's got to be a foundation somewhere. And so being able to be a storyteller, you know, whether I'm writing a book or I'm doing the podcast or I'm acting on stage at Acts on Stage, you know, I think storytelling is just, it's second to none. We'll always have that, you know, throughout humanity.
For folks that are out there that are, you know, maybe they have a story that they want to share. What were some of those steps that led you to like, okay, I'm ready to write this book?
Yeah.
And what was that journey like?
Yeah, man, you know, it was 5 years of me writing notes, and a lot of the notes were just experiences that I had. And this idea, sometimes you'll be walking through something, right? And then you'll think of like, oh man, that was cool. But what I did is I would just write it down instead of just thinking of it and just letting the thought flee after that. I would write it down. And so it took me 5 years to write notes. And then my process is I've got to map out everything, you know, like I thought of what the book overall was going to be for me. And then I wrote down chapters. And so out of my chapters, I was able to take those notes and place them in certain places. Now, I'm not a naturally organized person. I am, you know, I'm an artist. So I'm kind of just, boom, I'm here, you know? So I really had to work on that and take these different things and organize them. And then I started writing, and I found a place where I can be inspired to not only just be inspired to write this story, but be inspired to be myself. And from that, I kind of just started writing. Bro, I went to go speak at a church out in Michigan, and it's called Relevant Niles. Shout out to Relevant Niles. And I was at the pastor's house, and he's a good friend of mine, and I'm sitting on, you know, the couch, and I just start writing. And I put on some worship music and I had my headphones in, and I just started writing. And bro, I wrote 16,000 words in about a week, you know, and that is, I mean, any of you who are writers, it's a lot, you know, it translates to about, you know, 80 pages or something in a book. And it was just inspiring for me to review just my notes and where I came from and what that journey looked like for me going forward. And then I started to think about the people that it would help. And so then that was inspiring to me to think about all the people that it could help. And then I thought about my kids, you know, and they're always inspiring to me. I always aspire to be a better man, a better father, and a better person just for them. And so it just inspired me altogether to get this book done. But it took me a little while, but I definitely was able to get it done. And, you know, don't sleep on the process, you know, like it's okay if it doesn't all fall out of your head in a week, you know, It's okay if it doesn't happen that way. It's okay for it to take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you know, it's just about waking up and taking a step every day towards achieving that goal, you know? So that's really what it was like for me.
No, I love that. And you hear stories too about folks that like, you know, oh, I wrote this in 3 months, and, you know, then you have other people 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, right? Everyone's process and journey is different, right? And there's something to that, but it's okay. And understanding that it's okay. You know, I think of it also in terms of music, where you have some artists that, you know, they had a bangers every summer, 10 straight summers, right? But then you have someone like a D'Angelo that was working on a project for 5 years. but that's what it took. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then we were, as a society, better for it. So
Yeah.
it's like, don't rush the process. Trust the process. But I think it's just a matter of being, like you said, being authentic with the process and then being engaged with the process as well. And if you can just be, one step forward is forward. That is progress. That's dope. So I think that's something that folks can definitely take, where if you have an idea and you always thought about writing a book, is just kind of start it, like put it out there. Like I love kind of starting with like the end result and working backwards in my creative process of doing a video or whatever the production is okay, let's talk about what this final product is going to be. And it sounds like that's kind of what you did. Like, all right, here's my book, here's my chapters, and then let's fill it up.
That's right.
And I think that can be inspiring for people, because then you have like a real goal. So if you could just design, like, man, what does the cover of your book look like? What are some potential titles? And it's okay. Like, people can change titles and all that kind of stuff, but making it real, writing it down, putting it up on your mirror so you see it every morning, like those kinds of things matter. And then you can kind of work towards that. So I love having that final goal, and then it's like, all right, what steps is it going to take to get there? And then breaking the things up into digestible things. So you did that through chapters, right? And then notes that came, and then you applied that. That's amazing and dope to hear that. And I think that could be an approach for a lot of people. But I try to do a similar type of thing of having that end goal. What steps is it going to take to get there? And then what tasks do I need to complete to accomplish these steps, right? And then it's like, okay, this is now digestible, right? It's not something that just seems so massive and just so far away, where it's like, okay, I can do this little piece. And then, all right, we got through that milestone. Yeah. Now on to the next.
And don't be afraid to be yourself. I think for me, a lot of times I kind of find myself in this space where it's like, well, if I do it like this, are people going to like it? And that's the beautiful thing about art, is it's not for everybody, and who it's for. And so for me in my book, like even writing I knew what the title, I've always known what the title is going to be, but the cover of the book is, I love photography. I don't do it professionally, but it's a hobby of mine that I absolutely love. And I took a picture actually at Old Robe Trail. My kids and I were on a hike up there, and I took this picture of my son, and we're in a cave, and it was just a beautiful, amazing picture that I took of him. And as soon as I took that picture, I was like, that's the cover of my book, and it translated into that. And so I think being able to be yourself as well. I love photography. I love films. Like that's something that, I've written a couple of scripts, and even with that, the way that I put the book together is in acts, like it's different acts that you go through. So there's 3 different acts, and there's chapters within the acts, and it's kind of written out like a screenplay, and so I definitely can, appreciate that, but that's just my style of writing and who I am. So, I also say, just don't be afraid to be yourself, just be authentically who you are and let the work flow out of that.
No, I love that. And then how can people find the book? Where can they get it? How do they get involved?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon right now, and michaelbling.com is another place that you can get it. But yeah, definitely it's on Amazon and on my website.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
And then you talked about a little bit in terms of like, writing and acting and doing different things. What was your journey to get you on stage?
Oh, yeah. Actually, it started because my daughter does the Teen Summer Musical. So a friend of mine invited us out to this show. This was a few years back, and I lived in Linwood at the time, and the show was at the Langston Hughes Theater. And so, he's like, yeah, there's a show, and I didn't know much about the Langston Hughes Theater, and he was like, it's high school kids, it's called the Teen Summer Musical, and I'm like, man, I don't want to go to a high school show. I'm gonna drive an hour to go see a high school show. But he was like, no, just come through. It'll be dope. Trust me, it's good. And so I'm like, all right. So we go over to the show, and I take my daughter, and we sit and watch this show, and we're blown away. I mean, the acting and the singing and the dancing, and just, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen, and my daughter, she's been in theater, for a little while, and she was like, Dad, I want to do that. And so even while we were there, they do a Q&A afterwards. And so I stand up and I'm like, hey, we're from Linwood, and this was an amazing show. And how do we audition for the next one. My daughter wants to be in the next show. And so they're like, hey, join our mailing list and then we'll put it out. And so we put it out. I mean, we get on the mailing list and we go to audition. My daughter goes to audition and she gets in and the show. And so she's going through this, the rehearsals, and it's physically demanding. And the kids go there and it's a full-time job for them. They're 8 hours a day throughout the summer and they're working, and they get paid for it, by the way. And so they're working there. And my daughter, so we have an hour drive home. And so she gets in the car. It's about maybe 5-10 minutes to the freeway. And so I'm like, all right, you get 5 minutes to get all the complaining out that you need to get out. And then when we're on the way home, you're going to tell me something good about the show, and then we're going to listen to some worship music. And so, but one day that 5 minutes wasn't enough for her. And so she's like, Dad, I need a little bit more time. So she's complaining about the show. Well, at some point, Isaiah told her, hey, I got another show coming up and we're doing something. He didn't just tell her. I think she heard it in passing. And so she comes home. She's excited. She's like, Dad, I think you should be in the next show. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. And she was like, I need you to see what I go through on a regular basis. And so that's why I joined the show. And so I auditioned for a soldier's play and got into that, got casted, and realized it's not easy. The things that the actors go through, the preparation, the time, the excellence that Isaiah, he's the director, draws out of you for the shows are just, it's amazing, And so it was awesome to be a part of that. Then I did another show called Sadie's Kitchen. And again, the journey to that was great. And then I did Story of an Off-Brand Band, and that was amazing. And now I'm in this next one, Detroit 67. And so I kind of, got that acting bug in me, and I just continue to take it from there. So, yeah.
I love that. Isaiah, he's something special, man.
Yeah, he's hold, please.
In terms of in many ways, but definitely pulling the best out of people. Because I think when he sees someone, he sees the potential, he sees the light in you, and he's just really good at just bringing that out. And no, it's awesome to see every summer with all the youth, and also now with Acts on Stage and the adult stuff that they're doing. So like for someone that is thinking about like, man, because you've been 2 shows and your daughter was in it, so it's always kind of been around. But for folks that are thinking about, going into acting, what could you let them, what's some tips of, I wish I would have known prior to, and all that kind of stuff for folks that might be thinking about getting involved in the arts?
Yeah. So I wish I would have known how hard it was. It's not easy, and it's easy to look for, I was having a conversation actually with Michelle this morning, and we were talking about that, how it's easy to look from, your vantage point that's way up here or in the pews or whatever that you're sitting in and think, oh, they should just do this better, or they should do it like that. It's easy to do that. So I would go to shows and these kids are twirling and dancing and singing and, doing this stuff. And I'm like, I mean, it's dope. It's amazing. But I'm like, yeah, of course they did that. They probably just woke up out of bed one day and just started singing, and it's not that at all, So I definitely wish I'd have known that, because I could have been more prepared to kind of combat that. But Isaiah was gracious, and the cast has always been amazing. And that's one thing that's been amazing is the cast. Like you build relationships at Acts on Stage. It's family. It's not just you come do a show, you go home. You actually build relationships, So Acts on Stage is amazing for that. But also just do it. Just take the step. Just jump off the mountain and figure it out. I was having a conversation with Michelle, and I'm like, I'm the type of person that I like to build the airplane while I'm flying it. I don't need to know all the ins and outs. I don't need to know everything or how it's all going to work out. I'm just going to go and try it, So if, just believe in yourself and take a step. Have some faith. Yeah.
There we go.
Take a step.
So let's get into our quick fire round real quick.
I'm ready
to wrap this up. What's a quote that never leaves you?
A quote that never leaves me. Okay. Wait, do I have to share one or can I share 2?
Sure, 2. Go for it.
Okay. So the first one is the Bible. My favorite verse in the Bible is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not into your own understanding. And all of your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. That is my life verse. I live by that. Everything that I do comes out of that. But Maya Angelou, people will forget what you say. People will forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. And so I love that quote. I have it on my email signature.
No, man, Auntie Maya, she's the truth for sure. A favorite meal to cook for your kids?
Oh, my favorite meal. Actually, okay. So actually, my favorite is gonna be barbecue. I love barbecuing ribs and then cooking macaroni and cheese and greens for them. They love that kind of food, and so I like to see them, express how much they love the food. So yeah, that's probably gonna be it. Definitely ribs and macaroni and cheese. Yeah.
I love that. And it's funny how I talk to a lot of my contemporaries that have kids these days, but it's like I remember, hamburgers with sandwich bread.
Yeah.
And my son has got introduced to sushi, and I'm like, how did this happen?
Right?
What is going on?
I grew up on syrup sandwiches, so I'm like, my kids eating ribs and I get it.
These kids, I tell you. But what's your go-to creative soundtrack?
Oh,
When you want to get into that zone.
Man, gospel music. I think gospel music really helps me to, it really helps me to get there, like anything Kurt Franklin, Yolanda Adams, Tamala Mann, that Hezekiah Walker, they definitely helped me get there. So I think gospel music is really it for me. That's a good question.
No, I love that. If you could describe your journey in one word, what would it be?
Oh, man. Patience. That's a good question. Patience. Yeah. It would have to be patience. I've had to be patient with myself more than anything or anybody else, just allow the journey to unfold. So patience. Yeah.
Love that.
Another good question.
Coffee, tea, or a quiet morning walk?
Oh man. If I had to choose one?
Yeah. What's that morning routine? What helps you get it going?
Bro, definitely not quiet morning. I like coffee, but tea is it for me. Yeah.
I want to dig a little deeper. What kind of tea?
Man. Okay. So there's this kiwi green tea.
Okay.
That I like. Yeah. There's this kiwi green tea that I like. Yeah. I'll kind of segue off this story real quick, but I went to Nepal a few years ago and they produce over 70% of the world's tea. I didn't know that. And so Nepal is already in the Himalayan. It's strong, and they're already in the Himalayan mountains. And so you got to run up these stairs to get to it, and then you could see. So I'm thinking, I'm gonna run up these stairs. I'm in shape, bro. It took me like 20 minutes to catch my breath. There's no air up there. So anyway, definitely gonna be tea. Yeah, I love tea.
Excellent. And I love a good green tea.
Yeah.
Matcha. I'm currently doing this thing with Rise's mushroom matcha.
Okay.
And I like to add a little ginger and a little.
Okay.
lemon.
How does it taste? The mushroom, mushroom.
A lot of it is like kind of how do you have your tea, right? Like some folks like to add like milk and honey and all other things. I like mine like kind of how you talked about earlier. Like mine just like to get straight to the point.
Yeah.
Let's just go with it. And it is something you have to get accustomed to.
Yeah.
But it was quick. For me, I like it. I like it either way. But green tea, matcha isn't for everyone already, but it's just that plus some mushrooms and some other things. But just trying to get my health right.
I like it. I love it.
Yeah, that's dope. And then, but yeah, I guess lastly is just wanted to kind of tap in with how people can follow your journey, how they can tap in with you, and then if there's anything else that you wanted to say about the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So Michael B. Ling is my website. On there, you can join the mailing list. You can get my Instagram, my Facebook, my TikTok. I'm not great on social media. I try, but I'm not great on social media. I am excited though, because I did do a video on TikTok and it got like 8,000 views. So I was excited about that. And then my son humbled me right away. He was like, "That's not viral, Dad." So I was like, "All right, bro, thanks."
Thanks.
I appreciate you. After that, man, just the show is amazing. Just come see the show. I think that if you're on the fence about it, come see the show. If you're not sure about it, come see the show. If you didn't know about it, come see the show. You can get tickets from axonstage.com and the theaters in White Center, Detroit 67. Definitely come out and see the show.
Dope. Well, again, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys again for joining us for another episode of Elite Insights. You heard it. We got a great book. We talked about journey. We talked about forgiveness. We talked about a dope ass show you need to check out at Axon Stage. So see you guys next time. Peace.